So for problem number 1, we need to decide whether or not the statements are true or false. So this is not multiple choice. Each letter needs an answer. So for problem number, or letter A, we're trying to figure out if this graph has multiple horizontal intercepts. And the horizontal intercepts are right here, where the graph hits the horizontal axis, which is the x-axis. So as we can see, it does hit the axis in 1, 2 places, which means that it does apply in multiple places. So we're going to say true for letter A. Letter B says the horizontal intercept. So the horizontal intercept of the graph, again, was right here and right here. And it says represents the time when Andre was with his bike. So the y represents distance, and it's distance from his bicycle. So in the case of both these intercepts, the distance, because it's right here on the axis, is 0. And the same thing right here, because it lines up with the y-axis right here at 0. So if he is 0 feet away from his bike, because that's what this says, is it's the distance from his bicycle. So if he is 0 feet away from his bicycle, then that means he is with his bike. So this is also going to be true. For letter C, it says the minimum is at 17.1. Well, if I look at so they're talking about 17.1 being right here, but this is not the minimum because it's not the lowest point. The lowest point is actually your horizontal intercepts. So it can't be the minimum because there are 2 other points that are lower. So since that is not the minimum, that means that C is false. For letter D, the graph does have 2 maximums because it has 2 identical places up here at the top that are in the same place. So D is true. And then 21 seconds after he left his bike was the farthest he was away from it. So let's look at 21 seconds. So 21 seconds on the graph is here. And if I go up, yep, at 21 seconds, there is a maximum right there. So that does mean that that is the farthest distance away. So that will also be true. For number 2, the maximum is going to be right here. It says identify the maximum. And then the minimums, this actually has 2 minimums. So as long as you just label them for me, you're all good. And then I'm just going to label this section with an I because this does represent where the graph is increasing. This section also represents where it's increasing, so I'm going to represent this with an I. Then this section is decreasing and then decreasing again. So I'm going to label that part of the graph, and as long as you label it like this, that is totally okay. So you don't need to write me a whole story. As long as you've got this, you're good. For letter A, the maximum is going to occur right up here, which lines up with the 4 on the x-axis, which means that it is going to be option 3, because remember that independent variable, the x, is what's inside of the parentheses. So, number 3 is the maximum. The minimum is going to be right here, and it's in between 1 and 2, which means that the x value is going to be right here. So number 2 is the correct answer for B. The height stays the same at this little strip right here on the graph where it's flat, and it's between the numbers 7 and 8, which means it's going to be right here where the time is in between 7 and 8. So option C, number 4, goes with that. And then finally, the starting height will be right here at the start, at that vertical intercept, and that is when time equals 0, which means it is going to be option 1. To figure out the answer to letters A, we need to take the number that they are telling us to substitute for x and substitute it in for x. So in each case, for each function, we're going to take the x out of the function rule and replace it with a 100 and see which value is the largest. For function f, we'll do 4 times 100 and then take away 5. And when we do that, that gets us 395. For g, we do 100 minus 5 and we get 95. Then we would do 95 times 4, and that results in 380. So far, F is the largest one. Then for H, we'll do 100 divided by 4, which 100 divided by 4 is 25. 25 minus 5 is 20. So the one with the largest value is going to be F of x, because F of x is 395. For function f, this time for letter B, I'll do 4 times negative 100, and then negative 400 minus 5 gets me negative 495. For B, this would be negative 100 minus 5 is negative 105. Negative 105 times 4 gives me negative 420. And then finally, negative 100 divided by 4 gives me negative 25. Negative 25 minus 5 gets me negative 30. So for which value is the largest this time? This one is the least negative. So the one that is the largest is going to be H of x, because it's the one that's the least negative. For letter A, remember that squaring something, multiplying, making it to the second power, means that you multiply that number by itself 2 times. So I am going to do 2 times 2, because that's what it means to square something. I take the x and multiply it by itself 2 times. So 2 times 2 equals 4. I'm going to do the same thing, except now I'm going to substitute in a 3. So 3 to the second power equals 9, because that's 3 times 3. And then finally, for letter C, explain why it's not equal. So f of 2, we already got it from the previous problem, is 4. F of 3 that we got from the previous problem is 9. And then if we do f of 5, 5 times 5 is 25. So they are not equal to each other. So that is the explanation for why. For part A, the first plant started out as 5. Then it grew half a centimeter and it asked for 2 weeks. So at the end of 2 weeks, if I do 5 plus 0.5 times 2, plant number 1 was 6 centimeters tall. Plant number 2 started out at 4, and then it grew 0.75 centimeters a week. So still times 2 weeks. So after 2 weeks, plant number 2 was 5.5 centimeters. So plant 1 was taller at the end of 2 weeks. So after 10 weeks, we'd still do the initial start of 5, and then this plant grew 0.5 centimeter for 10 weeks, which means it would have a total height of 10 centimeters at the end of 10 weeks. Then the second plant, it started out at 4 plus 0.75 times 10. So this one would be at 11.5 centimeters. So plant number 2 is the largest one after 10 weeks, which makes sense because it is growing faster, even though it started out smaller.